Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corman Productions with my co-host Stacy, here to talk about From Season 2, Episode 4, This Way Gone. The episode's description reads as follows. As Boyd's condition grows more alarming, Sarah's return to town puts him in a difficult position. Jim shares a troubling new theory about the town. The episode was directed by Alexandra LaRoche. She directed the last episode. The episode was written by John Griffin and Jeff Pinker, the usual writing duo. Before going any further, I'll tell you a couple of things. One, this is not a spoiler-free podcast, so if you haven't watched the episode, I highly recommend you go and check it out, and then come back and give us a listen. Secondly, if you are listening to this on one of the platforms that this podcast is now available on, please follow, and feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Corman Productions, where additional content can be discovered. If you're already on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, and subscribe to our channel. Shoutouts this week to Latrice. Latrice is the Kelly of this podcast.
Yes.
Kelly being, of course, the one that was regularly commenting in the Quantum Leap podcast. Latrice has a theory that Victor created the talismans, that Boyd basically stumbled onto his hiding spot, and Victor himself eventually forgot about it. Basically, that tracks, because it seems like Victor doesn't really remember anything.
Victor's going through a period of he's kind of had pushed every memory aside, and now they're kind of slowly coming back to him as he's seeing things. I don't know if I'm fully on board with that. I think the talisman are a lot older than that, but I do think that's a fun theory.
She also mentioned that the video game theory that you shared from Mad Dog, was it?
Yes.
Was very similar to a Doctor Who episode. Now, you watched Doctor Who, I'm pretty sure, right?
I watched it to a point.
I
don't necessarily know what she's referring to here.
Gotcha. Yeah, I similarly watched some of Doctor Who, though after the Doctor got separated from Rose, I kind of stopped watching. Not for that reason.
Oh, that was real early.
Yeah. Not necessarily for that reason.
Sure did.
I just lost track of it. Well, it was very sad. I did actually see a couple episodes after that, but she thinks that someone in town is a sleeper agent, that they don't even know that they're compromised. Abby killing people when she did was her becoming activated, and she thinks Sarah was activated as well. Also, a shout out for Taryn Mathero. I don't know if that's how you pronounce the name. If I butchered that, I'm sorry. I'm not really great at pronunciations of names.
Yeah, and I think that's somebody who had commented previously. And I noticed just recently, YouTube's done this thing where we're no longer seeing people's display names, but we're only seeing their @ handles.
Okay.
So, like, people's names are coming up different
gotcha.
than they used to.
He mentioned that the tree that Kelly was tethered to had some scarring on it. Scarring changes during a conversation, and it was like a moon symbol or something. Did you happen to check back on that?
Yeah, I mean, I saw his pictures that he had posted in a Facebook group similar time to when he made that comment, and I don't know if I could definitely see a moon shape in one of the pictures. I think he was saying that it was like moving throughout the scene, and like the moon phase would change. I don't know if I necessarily saw that based on the pictures, and I did not go back to look at that. This has been kind of a rough week for me, so I did not dedicate as much time to From as, say, last week. Got some stuff going on in my household this week, so I didn't really get to go back and do a lot of digging into all of these things.
All right. Also, a shout out for Melanie Luis of the Facebook groups, who had a picture of her notes keeping track of the number of deaths versus the number of people joining the town. And her notes seem to make it very plausible, the whole population control theory.
Yeah.
That people die, people come in the same amount.
Yeah,
that they try to keep the same amount of people.
It seems to be comparable, if not exact. And they make it hard to do exact because we're not always getting exact numbers.
Right.
I mean, even like the people on the bus, they're like, oh, we accounted for about 22. That leaves wiggle room. But, it could also just be for the simplicity of filming, that they want to keep the cast the same size. So. Yeah.
I have her notes as a picture. I will include that in the video. You're probably seeing it now. All right, so before I get into something that I want to talk about.
Okay.
Let's go through the notes that you have
My
before
pre-episode notes. I don't
Yes.
have a lot this time, just
Okay.
a couple. Okay, so one, I found a Once Upon a Time reference that I can't believe I didn't catch before. So I went through all of that stuff in the last episode, or the one before that, or both probably. So just one more to add to that list. And I noticed this when looking at that picture. We referenced this picture last week. It's a picture of Simon Webster. That's the actor who plays Ethan. Just hanging out with the ghoulish children actors.
Okay.
The one where they're wearing the Crocs.
Yeah.
And I was looking at that picture as I was scrolling through a Facebook group. And in the background of that picture, we can see Fatima's car.
Mm.
Right? She drives a bug. It's been referenced. Like Ellis told during the proposal all about how when he first saw her drive up in the bug and she stopped right there, on the road in front of Colony House. And suddenly it hit me that I hadn't made this reference before. Of course, in Once Upon a Time, Emma drives a yellow bug.
Oh, okay.
And it's, that's a prominent character even in that series. Like she has that car through the entire series. And I've actually mentioned it before on this show is, when we were talking about the Once Upon a Time in Lost connections that, Emma has a sticker, bumper sticker.
Mm.
Couldn't get that word out. She got a bumper sticker on her car for Geronimo Jackson, which is a band that they had the record in Lost. Anyways, that's a bug. Fatima has a bug. And so in my head and looking at this picture, I thought her bug was also yellow. But then when I went looking at clips trying to get a screenshot of the car, it looks more white.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a creamy white or a really pale yellow. It's not exactly yellow like Emma's is, but in my head I remembered it being yellow. But one thing that's interesting to note is when you look at the close-ups, and I do have a picture of this I'll throw you. Fatima's driver's side door has been replaced. Like you can tell that panel's a different color than the rest of the car.
Mm.
And it's interesting to note that Emma's vehicle also has damage on the passenger's door. Her door wasn't replaced, but it needs to be.
Right.
So I don't know if this is an intentional nod or not, but definitely something I picked up on. Definitely not the same car, but I don't know. Maybe somebody just likes Volkswagen Beetles.
I am not one of those people, I can tell you that.
Okay, so the next point I have is I went ahead and I made a playlist on YouTube with all of the music that's been featured so far in this show.
Oh, that does remind me. Well, I'll let you finish your point.
Okay, so I'm going to give you the link for that so we can include it if anybody is interested. Let me know if I missed anything. I didn't catch any music in this episode to update it. But I figured, music is so important, it'd be good for us to just keep track of all of these songs somewhere.
Is Que Sera Sera in there?
Of course it is. All of the music from the show, like the jukebox music, the music from the trailers, all of that I put in there.
All right. You had a comment on Facebook that you were actually wrong about the song. Oh, that's the next
thing on my list.
Okay.
While I was making this playlist, I was researching, what songs were there. There are some websites that list all the music. And, I was going through to see what I missed and what order things are in. And I got to Jade's little violin solo that we got in the last episode. And I had quoted in our podcast last week that I thought he was playing Beautiful Dreamer. That is not what it is. According to multiple sources online, the song he was playing is a French song called La Boheme. Then I'm sure I don't know how to pronounce that. So I did include a violin version of that song I found on YouTube in the playlist.
Okay. Now, is there any thematic connections from that song to anything that goes on in the series?
I read the English translation of those lyrics very quickly. I didn't dive too deep into it. Did you read them?
I did not.
Okay. So, and I could be totally off because, I didn't, really dive into this song, but it seems to be, it's about, being an artist in Paris, and they're looking at, their life that they left behind, and they're kind of reminiscing about the past, is basically what I got out of it.
I mean, that kind of makes sense.
Right. It does fit a little bit, thinking about your life that you left behind, that you're no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest thing we can get from this is remembering that Jade was raised in France.
Right.
So this would have been a song he would have been exposed to if he was learning the violin while he was living in France.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Is that it for your notes?
One other thing related to the music as well. While I was putting this playlist together, "Dream a Little Dream of Me," which is the song again that was used for the season 2 trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned in one of our previous episodes how, this is also originally a Doris Day song, just like "Que Sera, Sera."
Right.
But what I failed to realize is the version that they actually used for this, and I'm not 100%, but I'm about 95% sure, listening to the versions of this song, trying to pick the right one to put in my playlist, that this is the version that was sung by Mama Cass Elliot of the Mamas and the Papas.
Okay.
And that's interesting to note because that's another Lost connection.
Oh, okay.
So in Lost, we hear another one of Mama Cass's songs, which is "Make Your Own Kind of Music." That was a featured song in season 2 of Lost, and it's the song that we heard when we first go into the bunker. So it's the first time that Lost kind of flips the story, if you will, and we're seeing something totally new, and you're like, what the heck just happened? It's a total, flip the switch on the story, and that's the song. And then that song would play kind of throughout. It was kind of became the theme song for one of the characters that we meet at that point, Desmond. And then another one of her songs was played just once during a Lost episode, and that's the song "It's Getting Better," also by Mama Cass. And that was played when Michael attempted to kill himself, Michael, of course, being the character played by Harold Perrineau.
Oh, okay.
So there was a particular link to his character and Mama Cass.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, well, so the one thing I wanted to talk about before we get into this episode this week, there's been a lot of negativity
There
in
has
the fan
been.
groups about season 2 specifically.
Yes.
Saying that we're not getting enough answers.
And particularly
that's-
episodes 2 and 3, people are really kind of...
I mean, yeah, 2 and 3.
3,
Yeah.
no, 3 and 4, I meant.
3 and 4,
3
okay.
and 4. People are really kind of expecting more to happen.
And they want more action. They want more monsters killing people.
Yeah.
So, for me, I like the slow burn. I like the
Mhm.
character building. I appreciate the last couple of episodes. So, I'm kind of curious as to, am I in the minority, or do I speak for the fan base?
I think it's pretty split.
Yeah, I think it's 50-50.
Okay, so not every type of show is right for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely a large group of people who would probably enjoy this experience better if they could binge it.
Right.
And may not have these complaints if they could just watch all 10 episodes over a weekend.
Mm. Which I'm thinking that's probably how a lot of people watch season 1.
Right. And
they were just able to binge
think that's the difference. I think a lot of the people with these complaints are probably the same people that found season 1 after it aired and binged. I mean, you binged season 1.
Yes, I did.
And I didn't. I watched it weekly. The first 3 episodes came out at once, and then every episode after that was weekly. And I mean, I've said it before. I'm happy that we're watching this show weekly. It would not be the same experience to binge it. You wouldn't have time to really stew on the details and really pick it apart and have this great, fan community where we can theorize together the way that the Lost community did this. That was one of the first shows to really have an online fan community that would, it's one of the first shows that were podcasted about weekly.
Right. Yeah.
And, this follows in that vein where we couldn't do all of this if it was binged.
Absolutely.
And I don't even just mean us talking about it on a podcast. I mean, the whole Frumily community wouldn't have these kind of discussions that we as a community have, because everybody would just watch it and everybody might want to talk about things, but everybody be at different places, and then it would just kind of be over.
Right.
And then there'd be some of this, between season where people would kind of talk about things and certain fans would dig deeper, but it definitely would be an entirely different fandom experience.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If it wasn't weekly.
Now, I'm kind of curious, you having been a Lost fan, did you experience the same kind of thing, like the same kind of split back then?
To be honest, I didn't watch Lost live.
Okay.
I picked up on Lost right around the time it was ending.
That's how I usually end up watching shows. But yeah.
It was one of those things that back then, you had to kind of be on it from the start or you missed your chance. And it was something I picked up a little bit later.
Gotcha.
But then I became a super fan and I've watched it I don't know, a dozen times through and through. And I've introduced multiple people to it. But no, I wasn't a week-to-week fan when it aired. I wasn't listening to the podcast. I knew people who were doing all of that, and it was just kind of in the background of me, and I was like, oh, cool, I missed out on this, because, like, you can't just go binge it and catch up back then. That wasn't really a thing until, you know, a little bit later. Like, again, around the time the show ended is when it started becoming available to do that with television.
Gotcha. Well, I'm not going to spend time trying to convince the people that are not enjoying the season that they should be.
The people who think that probably aren't listening to us to hear our opinions about it anyways.
Right, gotcha. Well, I mean, in general, like, I'm not going to spend much time and energy trying to convince them that they're wrong, because they're entitled to their feelings.
Oh, absolutely. They're entitled to their opinion, and you know what? If you want to wait and binge the show later, that's perfectly fine.
And I'm almost suggesting that might be the way that these people should go about watching the show, is just wait till it's over.
And I've seen people post that they're going to do that, like we should be angry about it. Well, okay, you're going to pull your ratings out of it, but I mean, that's okay.
Right.
If you're not enjoying it, don't do it.
Now, I have seen reports that this show has been renewed for season 3 anyway. I did actually find an article.
You found an official reference? Like, it's been one of those things that I've seen referenced in places, but I haven't seen anything official.
Right. And the idea was that they were going to start filming in June and ending in December of this year.
Which
I'm thinking those
may
plans
not be able to happen now.
Yeah, I think those plans are going to be altered. I don't know when the writing strike is going to end, but I've read things that I could go as long as through the summer.
Yeah.
So it's already renewed as far as I can tell. Like, but yeah, so if you do it, however you watch it, it's not going to affect a possible season 3 for sure. But all right, so your thoughts on this week's episode?
Okay, so again, talking about the pacing is really like, it's really like, I think, where the conversation falls with this episode. I thought we had a lot more great character development.
Oh, absolutely.
We got to check in with pretty much everyone except Ellis. We didn't see Ellis this episode.
Yeah, he was completely missing.
He's the only person I think we were missing a perspective on. I could have missed somebody else, but and here's the thing to realize: we're still within 24 hours of that rainstorm. We're still there, and that pacing is ridiculously slow. I'm not complaining about it, but it's something you have to realize when you're watching this. Right? And I've seen even some super dedicated fans that are posting in the groups not comprehending this. They're like, oh, what's her name? Marielle. She's been there for 4 days. No, she hasn't been there for 4 days. She's been there for like 4 hours.
Right.
Like after the night. We're still in that first day. Kelly's body is still warm. We're picking up immediately after that here.
Right.
Because, you know, we ended the last episode with Kenny finding Sarah, and we picked up here moments after. We haven't progressed any in time. We're still in that day. And it's important to remember that when you're criticizing the pacing is, okay, you can criticize the fact that time hasn't progressed, but you can't really criticize things that haven't happened because there hasn't been time in the story for these things to happen.
Right, that makes sense.
You know, like, when we say it too, like, oh, these people need to talk to each other, but really, like, most of them, they're just seeing each other for the first time, you know?
And some of those conversations do take place in this episode.
Yeah, we did get some of those conversations. Finally, we got some people talking to each other. I personally do not have a problem with the slow burn. I don't want them to give us answers right away. Like, what would be the point of this kind of show if we're given too many answers too quickly, right?
I want some answers.
Right, I want some answers. We do need some progression. I think we're going to start getting more progression. Remember, they do block shoot. So episodes 1 and 2 were filmed together. 3 and 4 were filmed together. You can feel that. Which means 5 and 6 were filmed together.
Right.
We know 6 is the episode we're waiting for. So I'm pretty sure we're going to get all ramped up during episode 5. And then shit's going to really hit the fan during episode 6. And I think a lot of these complaints people are having are going to subside by that point. But I think these, you know, living in this time and really catching up with all of these characters and really knowing specifically, like, we know what every character's feeling, we know who every character has interacted with, and I think that's important, you know, not only to know physically what's been going on with people, but mentally, where's everybody at right now? Where are their relationships with each other at?
I feel like these type of episodes are important to make episodes like episode 7 matter.
Right.
Because if we don't have that investment in the characters, then just seeing people die doesn't mean anything.
Right.
So I think an episode like the last one and this one are important to the overall story.
Absolutely. And I mean, I thought about it this way, like all still, again, 24 hours from the storm. Think about what these characters have been through in the last 24 to 36 hours. You could take any one of these characters and follow them through that day, and it would be a whole episode, right? Any one of the characters.
Yep.
Instead, we took 5 episodes and covered all of the characters.
Right.
But we could have taken a dozen episodes following each character and done the same thing. Because just there's that much stuff going on, and there's that many people, you know.
Right.
And in order for them to really tell us what's going on with everybody, this is what it takes.
I mean, like, there's a scene late in this episode that we'll talk about eventually with Bacta that is crucial to me because it's important to actually get to know her a little
Right.
bit. Because up to this point, we haven't had the chance.
Right.
I mean, there's still some characters that we should get to know better, but
and I'm sure it'll come. They want us to know these people. They want us to know everything going on with them, and I think that there's a reason for that. You know, and I'm pretty sure still that every word of dialogue in this show is important.
Right.
I don't think any conversation is filler, not one of them. But yeah, the pacing is just you just have to come at it understanding what it is.
Right.
And knowing we are still within these same 24 hours. And even if you want it to push forward, just remembering where we are, where these people are, is going to help you understand the dynamics of the specific scenes. I don't think this episode took place over more than 30 minutes.
Probably not.
We're still not at dark time yet. You know, they just took care of Kelly, and now we're just having these intimate little conversations, bouncing around between the different people and the different locations, and no time has passed. We're still right there, and that's okay. It kind of reminded me like we're almost like we're in a season of 24, you know, where the whole season took place over one day.
Right.
It's like that's where we're at right now. We've slowed down to such a pace, and I know it's going to pick up. We're going to hit night again, if not in episode 5, definitely in episode 6. So, if that's what people are waiting for, we're getting there.
I've read the episode descriptions. I don't know if you have. They posted all of them.
I've read them a little bit. I'm trying not to really dig into them too deep.
I mean, they're not like super specific.
Yeah, but they're spoilery enough to.
I get the impression that there's gonna be some kind of apocalyptic event by the end of the season.
Okay.
All right, so let's get into it.
Okay, so one amazing thing that happened in this episode.
Okay, you want more to say?
Well, just I mean, we'll hit this as we hit it, which, you know, we're going to hit the first one real soon here. And the first scene is we got to see 2 returning actors this episode.
Yes.
That had died in season 1, which is amazing.
Yes.
We got not 1, but 2 dead actors to come back and give us new scenes.
Which, by the way, means that anybody who dies, that doesn't mean that's going to be the last time that we see him.
Right, absolutely.
Like, we could see Tom again at some
absolutely,
point.
We could see Tom. And I mean, I'd asked Reed Price on Twitter if I was like, is there any chance we're going to get a flashback with Tom? And he was kind of, you know, secretive about that.
I'm sure he's not allowed to say.
No, but they're not allowed to give answers like that. But
right.
I don't know if it was just a hard up no. He might have been able to say no.
You guys have become like the best of friends recently on Twitter. All right, so the episode begins with a flashback to Kenny and Mrs. Liu bringing his father to Christie's hospital to stay. He doesn't want to be there, but there was an incident where a door was opened. Specifically, he did. He thought he heard his brothers outside or something like that.
Which we know is the monsters trying to trick him.
Right. And, you know, given that his mind is not all there.
Yeah, we know he had an Alzheimer's event the night that led them to this town. Remember, he had taken a bus for no reason, and his family had went after him, and they were driving back home when they found the tree.
Right, and I was just watching that scene recently. That scene where Kenny is talking to Father Khatri on the stairs when he's drunk about that incident. So that was kind of fresh in my mind when I saw this episode. So I'm actually kind of glad that I rewatched some of season 1 before watching this episode. So yeah, there was some incident where he opened a door. They had a scare. Somehow they managed to not die.
Yeah, they had a close call, but it didn't go bad because you know, Kenny and Mrs. Liu were there to pull him back out of this and get the door closed. But it scared them enough that they realized he needs to be somewhere where he can't just open the door.
And you know, it's funny. You know, we have this sci-fi horror series, but this is a very relatable human moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you know, there comes a time where us kids eventually have to be in the situation with the parents, where their mind slowly goes.
And this gives us that backstory of, you know, how Mr. Liu ended up living in the basement of the clinic.
Right.
And I remind me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first scene we've ever seen with Elizabeth Moy and the Mr. Liu character together.
I don't recall seeing them together before.
Yeah, because when we picked up in season 1, he was already living in the basement. We saw Kenny have scenes with him, but I don't think we ever saw the parents together.
Yeah,
until this scene, which is kind of funny to think about.
Yeah, he didn't get to stick around for very long because I don't think it was very long before.
Right, he was there for one night.
Right. Yeah, so Kenny is clearly upset. He's outside. He runs into Boyd, who talks to him about what happened. And Boyd suggests he could use a deputy. Someone to watch his six.
Yep.
And Kenny seems flattered and surprised by this offer. And this is how this relationship was born.
Right, so that's what we're really supposed to be, focusing on here is this is the start of this relationship between Kenny and Boyd. And Kenny looks up to him. He thinks he can trust him. He thinks they're super close. And they have been. And it's just to really put into perspective how betrayed Kenny feels by the end of this episode.
Yeah.
But I love that we got this flashback. I loved bringing back Mr. Liu. I don't have that actor's name, unfortunately. I apologize for that. I don't have that in front of me. But it was a great scene. I loved seeing the whole family together. And it was a beautiful moment, and I'm glad that we got to go there. I'm glad that we're going to start seeing some kind of flashbacks. Like, we've gotten a couple of them before. Yeah. Like, we've got flashbacks with Boyd, and I feel like they're going to start giving us more little moments like that, which is something that Lost depended on a lot.
Right.
I know people don't want this to turn into that, where it's, completely dependent on flashbacks, but I like to get glimpses of this stuff that we, have kind of heard about, but maybe haven't seen yet.
Right. We don't really need to have, deep flashback episodes.
But I'd like to have...
We could have...
get things like this.
Right. Flashbacks like this.
And I love
beautifully
seeing
handled.
Actors that have left us. I'd love to see them come back and get
And honestly, this
scene.
Is beautiful writing. How this all connects and why they brought this flashback in the first place. It highlights the tragedy of where the show ends up going. We have a very odd cut to the present day. The transitions are something of a problem in the show. We see present day Kenny running to find Boyd to show him something. We know this is Sarah, but
right.
Boyd doesn't know
He
this
had
yet.
just moments ago found Sarah in the basement. He will soon learn handcuffed her to the chair and runs out to find Boyd. And he's like, no, I got to show you now.
Right.
And remember, Boyd, what he's just gone through, he killed Kelly. He went and had this very heated conversation with Donna, and he's just now walking back into town after that.
Right.
And that's what he's like, can we wait, Kenny? I need a minute.
Right. And then we have our credits. Que sera, sera. And after the credits, we have Julie entering the scene with her literal first line of the episode asking, hey, Mom, I'm going to make some tea. Do you want some?
Yeah.
And I laughed for a minute on this. I don't know that it was supposed to be funny, but I found it very funny.
People are suspicious of the tea. I'm still not. I mean, if it turns out that that's what it is, that's what it is. But I honestly think at this point, they're pushing the tea on us as a total red herring. I don't think the tea is anything. I think it's something we can laugh at.
It's a reoccurring motif, and it is something that I found very humorous.
Yeah.
That Julie, that was her literal first line after the credits when we come back. Tabitha admits to seeing the kids again.
Yeah, she's very distraught, and Julie's like, what is it, Mom? Tell me. We covered this last episode, an hour ago.
This was not too long after she dragged Ethan back into the house.
As far as her timeline, remember, that's where she was. She just saw the kids again. She dragged him in, and now she's standing in the kitchen. She's staring out the window. The water's running in the sink. She's not even paying attention to what she's doing. And, her mind is trying to, make sense of all of this.
Right. She says she needs to talk to Jim, and she claims to be fine, but she wants Julie to watch Ethan. And, she actually does a good job watching Ethan in this episode. Maybe not so much in the past, but she does okay here.
Yeah.
Ethan
they're starting to get their act together,
right.
This family, with watching the kid.
and good, it's about time. Ethan comes down the stairs, and she briefly talks to Ethan before Jade enters the house.
Jade gets home. Remember, we're at Mrs. Liu's house now.
Right.
We've just moved in. And Jade had just come back from his blow-up with Victor, right? So he was pulled out of the house when Victor took the violin.
Is that literally when this takes place?
I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
He had just walked back, because they were halfway to Colony House.
Okay.
And now he just walked back. I'm pretty sure. Like I said, we're getting no time advancement.
Wow.
Because he
Okay.
comes in holding his notebook. So yeah,
So he ends up ranting up the stairs, and
he's like, "You guys are here now. Like, what the frick?" And I found it really funny. One of the funniest lines of this episode. He goes, "I just got rid of those 3 smelly hippies from Colony House, and now you people are here."
right.
Listen, Jade, I don't think you smell any better than them.
I'm sure you don't.
I'm sure you don't. You haven't changed your clothes since like episode 3. You're doing the same things that all those hippies are doing.
Right.
You smell just as bad as they do. Go take a shower.
I
Put
would've-
the book down. Go find some clean clothes.
Right. I would have found it funny if this was the only time that we saw Jade in this episode, but we do get another scene, and it's a great scene. But it would have been really funny if that was it for Jade in this episode. So Julie asks Ethan if he wants to go visit Victor, and of course he does.
Yeah, because remember at the diner, which was just maybe an hour or two ago, he wanted to go see Victor. Tabitha said no. Now that Tabitha's gone, Julie's like, okay, let's go see Victor.
Right. We cut to Kenny, who brings Boyd down to the church basement, and Boyd is shocked to see Sarah. He tells Kenny to give them a moment, which confuses him, and he doesn't seem to really want to go.
Mm-hmm.
But he eventually listens to Boyd and does so. Boyd unchains her.
Yeah, which I don't know if that was the best idea. The first thing you're going to do is unhandcuff her. I get that he trusts her, but I don't know if that felt like the right thing to do in this situation.
Right. Sarah said that she went to the tree, just like Boyd, right behind him, and ended up in this basement. And that's where she stayed. And she ends up asking Boyd, well, where did you go? And Boyd does not want to talk about it.
He doesn't want to talk about it. And, you know, it left me wondering, is she telling the truth? Or is she leaving a leg of her journey out the same way he's leaving a leg of his journey out?
I mean, possibly.
She totally could be telling the truth.
I'm inclined to take her at her word
But-
at this point.
But she specifically said, I went through the tree, and then I was here. Which is the exact same line Boyd used when he was lying to Ellis. He
All
said,
right.
I went through the tree, and I don't know, then I was here.
Well, what Boyd actually said is that he made his way back to town. So not like he just appeared in the town.
Right, but he said, and then I was here.
Right,
Like, meaning, I'm not going to tell you what happened in the middle.
right.
So,
So you think she...
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell with Sarah.
Right.
It's really hard. She keeps her cards close at hand, and it's very possible she's I mean, we know she's hiding things from everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but is she hiding things from Boyd, or is she being completely honest with him at this point?
Not sure. She does tell Boyd about the boy in white.
Yes, they talk about the boy in white because he was like, okay, how'd you know about the tree? Like,
Right.
he's still completely clueless about
Mhm.
what's going on.
Boyd says he's happy that she's back and that she's good, but her being there is a shitstorm waiting to happen. They need to figure out how to handle things. And Sarah says, hey, you know what we need to do.
Yeah, she knows. She's come to terms with the fact that there's only one thing that can happen here, and it means she's dying, and she's okay with that.
She has this line where she says, you know I can't live in town anymore, which made me think that there might be another option, that exile was a possibility. But
if she wanted
later,
to do that, why wouldn't she have already left?
Right. At the same time, I don't think, given what she says later, that that's what she means.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's like, of course you have to turn me in.
Right.
Like, what else are we going to do?
Right.
She doesn't want him to help her find a way out of this.
Mm-hmm. Because, as we see, she's racked with guilt
Of
over her
course.
actions.
Because she's a good person.
She is not an evil person.
She's not
She
an
is a
evil
very good
person. All of these things that she has done is because she was manipulated into thinking they were the right thing to do.
Mhm.
And we saw her discussion with Christy, you know, when she spent the night in the clinic, and she was basically asking for permission. What should I do, without actually telling her what's going on?
And I watched that scene again, too.
Okay.
And I'm like, Christy, what the hell? Why didn't you, why didn't that ring alarm bells off in your head? Like, why didn't you do something?
Yeah, why
here?
didn't you say, what are you talking about?
Like, ask more questions.
Yeah, really. But you know, like, we're led to be sympathetic for Sarah,
Mhm.
right? And as much as she's done super terrible things, it's almost like you can't blame her.
Right.
You know, these aren't her decisions. It's her decision to listen to these voices, but
Mm,
they're super manipulating her. They told her, you know, everybody's going to die if you don't do this.
mm.
They've given her ultimatums.
She realizes that Kenny doesn't know that she is responsible for his father's death.
Right, which I thought Kenny knew.
I guess not.
Up until this scene, I had thought Kenny found out when, after everything happened with Ethan. I thought Boyd told Kenny. So I was wrong. I had gone into that totally thinking that he was fully up already on this. Now, one thing I want to mention in this basement, and something that we talked about last week, is that there's items in the basement.
Okay, so you actually noticed those.
So I was looking in this episode, and I did definitely notice there's an old-timey wicker wheelchair, just like there was in the caves. I don't think it's trying to tell us that the items physically are in here that were in the caves. I think it's just, here's items from the same time period, is how I'm taking it.
Gotcha. Okay, so, okay. Boyd goes to talk to Kenny. He's surprisingly candid about everything in this scene, except for her role in Kenny's death and the Martin worm situation. He doesn't talk about that, but he reveals almost everything else, and I'm surprised by that, to be honest. I was surprised it was so clear in talking about everything that had happened besides those things.
He has to explain, right, like, about Sarah, because Kenny doesn't know anything, so he didn't even know that Sarah was alive.
Right.
He tells him how Father Khatri had Sarah, and I don't even know if he said that intentionally. I think he's just kind of talking through it, and then Kenny's like, "Well, wait, what?" And every sentence is like, "But what? Like, why don't I know about this? Why don't I know about that? Why don't I know about this other thing?"
Yeah, the revelations make Kenny upset.
He's very upset, and every sentence makes him more upset. And so Boyd, he admitted he took her into the forest, tells him why, and he's very intentionally, of course, leaving out the stuff about leaving the clinic door open, because that's, of course, very personal to Kenny.
Right.
And he slips up, and he says, when she killed those people, and of course Kenny picked up on that. He's like, "Those people."
Right.
It was just Nathan. What do you mean, those people?
Right.
And I think Boyd does an okay job, talking his way out of this.
He behaves extremely erratically.
He's like, almost people, like Ethan, and you could almost believe that he was just not using the right words because he was flustered. But it was enough to make Kenny suspicious, enough for him to really start, looking at things deeper and wondering if there's more he doesn't know.
Kenny worries about when everyone else finds out, thinks Sarah is dangerous and belongs in the box.
Right, and at this point, he's trying to protect Boyd.
Right.
And that just makes this whole thing even more heartbreaking, as his concern here is protecting Boyd so Boyd doesn't get in trouble for hiding Sarah.
And Kenny makes the case that for the idea of putting her in the box, and Boyd gets angry.
Yeah, he says no one else is going in the box, which
it's clear that the Frank thing is still
I
on
agree
his mind.
with. I agree. The box is a really stupid idea. You're in a survival situation. You don't need to start killing your own people. If you want to imprison people, fine. But I think the box is a terrible idea all around.
And I'm actually kind of curious why the box still exists if Boyd is so against it at this point.
Yeah.
Like, he rebuilt the thing afterwards. Why not just destroy it completely?
Well, because this was his law, and he's still on that thing of, I need to keep my word.
Right.
Like when you're a parent and you make a threat, you got to follow through with it.
Yes, otherwise your threats are, not very effective in the future. At the same time, I think that if Boyd wanted to, he could easily make the case for doing something else as punishment.
Absolutely, but he should have done that prior to now when it...
Absolutely.
Now when there's a reason.
So he starts to have what seems like a panic attack, and he's having trouble breathing. He ends up going outside. He sees the worms moving around in his arms, and he collapses, and Kenny ends up calling for help.
Yeah, so he almost passes out here. He can't walk. And remember everything he's been through in the last 24 hours. He hasn't slept. He's dealing with the Parkinson's and the worms, the spider bites, the lack of sleep, the secrets, the tree, the hallucinations, the possible time travel. He's got a lot going on, this guy.
Yeah, he definitely needs to talk to someone, and he eventually does so in a rather unique way. Julie and Ethan at Colony House. Julie notices Elgin as she goes into the house. Ethan goes upstairs to see Victor, and Julie ends up running into Fatima, who, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the first scene they've shared together since episode 7 when she ran off. Yes, this is the first
interaction that we've seen. Now, they were both in Colony House during the whole let's set up the tower business, but we didn't see any interactions between them.
So, I mean, it's quite possible that was already dealt with and resolved, and they've moved on. Julie gets the news about Ellis and accepts her invite to be a bridesmaid. She asks about Elgin and says she'll talk to him because he's having a tough time,
Mm-hmm.
and it was nice to have someone do that for her. Upstairs, Victor is drawing what he's seen, probably in the caves. It looks like he's drawing a monster. Ethan knocks on the door, and initially Victor kind of ignores it, but eventually he goes over there and admits, I'm not very happy with you right now.
Yeah, and I love this scene.
Oh, yeah. This
Both of these actors,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, they did such an amazing job with his characters.
Yeah. Victor's like, I don't know, are you going to steal something from me again?
Yeah, you can. So you see, like, Victor doesn't look a day older
Right.
than Ethan in this scene. Like, they are two
They behave exactly
very
the same.
young children
Uh-huh.
who are having a tiff.
Right. So Ethan tells him he tried to stop Jade, and Victor says, well, you should have said it louder. And I laughed. I laughed so hard at that line. That was just so funny to me.
Yeah, this scene was great, and it really helps remind you, how juvenile Victor is. Where his brain's at.
He spent a lot of time by himself.
He's
Now,
never gotten the chance to grow up.
Right. I've said that he might be on the spectrum. It could be that, or it could just simply be because he was not socialized, really. He was a kid, and then everybody died, and he was alone forever.
Yeah. And it's a good point to mention here that Ethan's also shown a lot of maturity for his age.
Yeah.
If Ethan's lines weren't played by a child, they could easily have given all of his dialogue in this series to a grown actor, and it still would have fit. Like, he's super mature.
Right. Ethan apologizes and then gives him markers that he found in storage, I believe.
Yeah, they found it in the storage, I'm assuming, when he was with Mrs. Lou looking for toys. And it's just so sweet. He's like, I thought you'd like these.
Right.
Because, you only get to draw with crayons. And remember, he thinks that's super weird that this grown-up is drawing with crayons.
Right.
So he brought him some markers, and those markers are probably dried up.
But it's still the thought that counts.
It's so sweet. He's like offering him a peace offering. And, we've seen last episode in the diner, Ethan feels guilty that they went through Victor's room. Like, he's genuinely sorry. He's not this child who doesn't understand what he did wrong. He is here because he's apologizing. He's like, I'm so sorry that we did this. Even though he honestly had nothing to do with it. Like, it was all Jade.
He tried to stop him, and Victor's a little bit unreasonable here, thinking that Jade would be in any way stopped by this little Ethan guy. So I think, but yeah, like he's a child himself mentally. And in fact, I would almost argue that Ethan is more mature than Victor.
Absolutely. He is. But again, this whole scene is just super beautiful where Ethan's trying so hard to apologize and Victor is just not ready for it. And he's like, I'm super mad at you, girl. And he's drawing. You said he was drawing, and he mentions how he's drawing new stuff that they saw, and he's trying to get those memories down. And then they talk a little bit about Tabitha, and Victor says, "Yeah, she's a nice lady. You're real lucky to have a mom like her." And I get the impression he's kind of remembering his mom now and feeling abandoned that his mom's not here because he's still inside this little child that's been orphaned.
Right. So Ethan apologizes and Victor just says, okay.
Yeah.
And then he leaves upset.
Yeah.
Julie goes to speak to Elgin and they bond.
Yeah, there's something interesting I noticed. Julie goes up and says, hey, you're Elgin, right?
And he actually knows exactly
He knows her name.
Is.
He's like, oh, Julie? Now, could it be just because people have told him who this girl is and he knows?
Maybe he asked because he has a little crush.
Like maybe there's been a conversation where he's been told her name. Or does he know her name?
Right.
Because he knows things.
Right.
But I found it notable that he said her name, not her.
Yeah, it isn't that is interesting. Ethan comes out. He's clearly upset. He says he wants to go. They're in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah, and she's telling him, if you need some, I'm sure everybody tells you they're here to talk, but if you need someone to talk, I'm around. And they don't really get a chance to talk because Ethan comes out upset.
You can almost see the little love bubbles going over Elgin's head. He definitely looks like the Sims character in this moment who's gotten some love points here.
Yeah, so Julie's got a lot of options. It sounds like.
Yeah. So yeah. And she's a cute girl, so that's not too surprising.
Elgin might be the most age appropriate
I think
that
so.
we've encountered so far.
I don't know. Is he younger than Kenny, you think? It's really hard to tell.
It's hard to tell.
He's a big
I
guy.
guess he's maybe a little younger than him, yeah.
Okay, so she sees that Ethan leaving upset as her cue to go, and she does so. Boyd, meanwhile, is getting checked out by Christy. He asks about spider bites, which Christy checks on.
Right,
and-
he admits the spiders.
Right. It's interesting. She looks at it, so I guess they were just normal spider bites, not anything to be too concerned
Nothing
about.
that stood out, but she did notice, of course, this giant gash on his arm.
He's like, do you want to tell me about this? And that's when Boyd gets all defensive and says, this is nothing.
Yeah,
and puts his shirt
he
back
says,
on.
I cut it on a tree.
Right.
Which clearly you didn't do that on a tree.
Or no.
And
no.
she gives him the benefit of the doubt. She's just like, okay, well, keep it clean. Let me know if you have any problems with it.
Mm-hmm. He asks about cognitive symptoms being impacted by Parkinson's, and Chrissy doesn't think it's a concern right now.
Yeah, but she did mention, I noted, visual impairments. She asked him, and because that's an early symptom, I guess. And we did have that question of what's going on with Boyd's vision.
Right.
Was it just the monsters, or
Right.
is he losing his vision?
So actually, that was not necessarily an artful shot, but really what Boyd was seeing at that time.
Possibly.
Back in episode 2, I believe it was.
And one thing I noticed in this episode, in this scene, is Christy's wearing her engagement ring around her neck on a necklace. And I made the note, has she always worn that there?
Right.
Or is that new? And I didn't go back to check any of these notes this time, but that's something I'm curious, to go back and look, is that where she always wore her ring at, or is this new based on, what's going on with her and Marielle right now?
Right. It's interesting that she is not, in fact, wearing that engagement ring.
Mary's wearing her ring.
Is she?
I mean, she's wearing a ring on her
Right.
ring finger.
And that actually breeds the question, has she just been continuously wearing that ring throughout Chrissy's disappearance?
Right.
Meaning that her fiance did not, in fact, move on during the missing time. Okay, Chrissy says he needs to rest and that he doesn't need any extra stress, which causes Boyd to laugh, saying, how does one avoid stress? How does anyone avoid stress in this situation? And they both ended up laughing together.
Yeah. And also throughout this, she had said, like, oh, do you have any depression? And he's like, seriously? Like, everybody here's depressed.
Well, Chris, I suffer from some depression. I don't know. Is there anything that you can help me out with? Anyway, moving along. Kenny gets food from the diner. He's pretty much indicating that it's for Boyd, but it's not.
We know it's for Sarah.
Right. His mother tells him that he works too hard, and basically that Boyd does as well, echoing what Chrissy was just saying in the previous scene. She asks about the Chrissy situation, and he claims that he's okay. I don't believe him. I don't think you should.
Yeah, he's like, I knew she was engaged. Like,
Kenny, by the end of this episode, might be the most un-okay person in this town.
I don't know. We've got a lot of un-okay people.
Yeah, I don't know. But, poor Kenny.
Kenny.
That's the nickname.
And now Mom's noticing poor Kenny.
Yes. We have a Bacta scene where she's in Tom's bar, Tom's previous bar anyway.
It's Tom's bar. It's
Right.
his.
Okay.
He can keep it.
Okay. Nobody else is going to lay claim to it.
I mean, somebody probably will. But
Eventually. But, okay, so Jade ends up entering, and she's annoyed by her presence because he just wants to find some place to be alone and do whatever the heck he's doing.
Now, I found this interesting. He comes in and he's like, there's nowhere in this town I can be alone. But wasn't he just left alone at the Lou house?
Right.
He got there. Julie and Ethan left. Tabitha had already gone. Mrs. Lou and Kenny are at the diner.
Right.
He was alone in this house. Why did you leave?
I'm not sure.
If you're looking to be alone, you were alone.
Yes. He ends up realizing that she was one of the people from the bus, and says, never mind, stay as long as you want. So this scene is really set up interesting. He goes and sits in the back.
Mm-hmm.
We see he's blurry, he's not in focus. We see Bacta in focus. And she starts to blame herself for not listening to Elgin.
Right.
That she should have turned around.
She should have turned around when he said to. And, of course, Jade realizes her fault here and steps up and asks her, like, did that happen before or after you saw the tree?
Right. And when she realized that she already saw the tree, it's like, oh, well, you were screwed anyway.
Yeah, it's too late. You were already here.
So she cycles to the next bit of guilt, thinking that she's responsible for all these people dying on the bus because she was responsible for them.
As well as responsible for all these other people being trapped here.
Right. And Jade, he's being a bit of an insensitive asshole, but he's right.
Oh, absolutely.
He's like...
It's not your fault.
Yeah, like, do you want tears with this pity party that you're having? And then goes and sits and explains, hey, look, this is not your fault.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to feel like crap, feel crappy about your own situation.
Right. You don't need to carry the guilt of anybody else.
Right.
Just because you were driving, you didn't bring those people here.
And she's basically, he's like, they were on a bus. Their lives could have been great.
Yeah,
anyway.
he goes, classic Jade. He like degrades the passengers. He's like, they were on a bus.
That is a very elitist statement from him.
Yeah, he's like, if you're on a bus, like,
But,
you are right, your life shit. It doesn't matter that you don't have your life anymore.
But he's just basically making a joke, and Bacta ends up laughing with him, and he ends up revealing that he ended up here after his company was sold, which I think we already knew.
Yeah, we knew that, but he's telling her, and it's important to note here because she's telling him, like, I wasn't even supposed to be on that bus. She said the only reason she's doing this job is to make money to pay for her tuition. She made enough money and then decided to just work a couple extra weeks so she could stash some savings away to treat herself to a trip.
Right.
Well, Bacta, you got a trip, all right? You have a nice, long vacation in Fromville.
Perhaps not the trip that you had in mind, but a trip nonetheless. I mean, beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah, so they bonded over the fact that, they deserved something in their life that they had just come to, and now it was taken away from them. And I saw somebody commenting on Facebook, like we had discussed before, well, maybe everyone had some sort of tragedy in their life, but talking about these characters, and someone had said, well, maybe it's not just about tragedy, but more just about changes in your life. Some of those changes were tragic, and some of them were just altering the course of your life. She was about to start a new career with whatever degree. We still don't know what she got her degree in. And, Jade had sold his company. He was turning a leaf to start a new life. And Christy was about to get married. So there was a lot of life changes. Of course, Boyd retired.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe that's a thing, is that these people were on a precipice of turning a chapter.
And they ended up in a chapter that they most definitely did not want to be in, for sure.
Yes.
This is a great scene between the two of them. Jade is absolutely Jade in the scene, but he's great.
But he's also making a connection with her.
Right. And I think he is exactly what Bacta needs.
Yeah.
Like, I think anybody else in the scene might have said the same things, but I think Jade was the one that she needed at that moment. Tabitha goes to the hospital looking for Jim and doesn't see him. She ends up running into Mary looking at drugs. Okay, so before this episode, in my head, I was thinking, like, late at night, like one of my many crazy thoughts that I have at night. I was thinking, so does Christy keep, like, a cabinet somewhere of medications?
And there you got your answer.
Right. And I also said, it's not like I want to see them taking an inventory or anything. And then we stumble on this scene. She's looking at a cabinet of medication, and she says, I'm just taking inventory.
Ooh.
So this was all in my head.
You
but
willed it into existence.
So yeah, it was really funny. Okay, so Tabitha does not recognize
Tabitha
Mary
hasn't
here,
met her yet.
but she has. They were in the scene together. I mean, she was in the background. I get it.
The same scene where Jim didn't meet her.
Right.
So Jim and Tabitha were just so involved in their own conversation, they both missed her.
That they totally missed this new person standing in the corner.
I mean, that's what
Christy.
we're led to believe, because they both had the same reaction when meeting her later. Right.
You have to be pretty oblivious to not notice this.
I guess you could say that about Jim and Tabitha.
I guess so. They're mixed up in their own concerns, but damn. Like, they did see her before.
Yeah. So she's kind of looking at Mary and questioning, who are you? And Mary explains, I was on the bus. And then she feels the need to explain why she's going through the drug cabinet. She goes, don't worry, I'm a nurse. I'm just helping Christy take inventory.
I mean, if you were a person who were stumbling on a person just randomly going through the medicine cabinet, you might have the question. And I'm assuming that Mary knows that, so that's why she explained herself.
Now, people online, I saw a lot of people just this morning, like, after, I took these notes a couple days ago, but saying they don't trust Mary and they think she's a drug addict. And they totally don't buy her saying she's just helping Christy.
It's possible.
It's possible.
I don't see it.
But
not at this time.
Did you take this scene at face value?
I took it at face value.
Okay, me too. So I took it as, yeah, she's a nurse. She's clearly thrown in now that she's Christy's assistant.
Right.
Like, there's no other option here. She's going to live with Christy. She's going to help her run the clinic. We have a nurse position open after the last nurse got eaten. And she's going to want to know what supplies they have available.
Right.
One of the last scenes we saw her in, she told Jim, let me go see if I can find some aspirin for you.
Right.
So it makes perfect sense to me that she's going to want to, like, just look at everything and know what's here. And maybe not take inventory because people are like, oh, she's not writing anything down. She's taking inventory for herself.
Right.
So she knows. And I can take it at that face value.
Yeah, that's currently where I'm at.
Yeah. So one other thing from this scene that I did take note of is right on top of this medicine chest, it's either a clock or it's just like a scale that they're using to weigh medicine. And I showed you that.
Yes.
I'm not 100%. It could go either way. If it's a clock, it's pointing at 12 o'clock, which is also where it would be if it was a scale pointed at 0,
Right.
But I just want to mention that because I do have notes about clocks that we see later in this episode. So if this is a clock, just to note that it's showing straight noon.
Okay. Are you going to talk about that now or later?
Nope. Just clocks is on my brain.
Okay. So we'll get back to that. So Tabitha goes and finds Jim looking at the bus, and I'm once again going, what the hell are you doing, Jim? Why are you leaving the clinic?
Yeah, so he walked out of the clinic, and if you've looked at, like, the map of this place, the clinic's a little ways away from the diner. He took a nice walk to get here.
And not long after this, he's going to walk to County House with 3 broken ribs and his other injuries.
Yeah.
Like, damn, Jim. You should be in bed. You shouldn't be doing any of this stuff.
A lot of these people need to be resting, and they're not taking doctor's orders very seriously.
Jim reveals that he thinks the... Oh, wait. I'll get to that. Okay, so they're looking at the bus, and then Jim takes her away from the bus, more towards the house. Yeah. She reacts to the house.
Tabitha has the reaction. This is the first... She's looked at the...
Is it the first time?
She's looked at the house through, like, the windows of the diner before. But this is the first time she's, like, actually standing right next to it. So she has a reaction because, she's realizing her husband was trapped under there a few hours ago.
So I'm just curious... When she ran back to the town, was Jim already unburied at that point?
I would assume, yes. Okay. He was unburied by the time they got back. We don't know exactly how far away Victor's truck is.
Right.
We can imagine it might have taken her a little while to get back to town.
Gotcha. And plus, she looked like she was running in the wrong direction anyway.
Yeah. Now, in the background, so earlier when Kenny was talking to his mom in the diner, he had noticed out the window that people were going through the dead passenger stuff. So we saw in the last episode that the living passengers took their shit and went to Colony House. Now the bags that are remaining obviously belong to the dead. And people are starting to go through them. And Kenny had said in that scene to his mom, you better get out there. Because remember, she's the one who keeps track of storage.
Right.
Both the storage in the diner, and then we know there's this clothes storage at the barn, and she's kind of taken over that. We know originally it was Abby's job.
Right.
We were told that, but assuming when she died, Mrs. Lou took over. So Kenny had told her to get out there. So in the background, behind this scene with Jim and Tabitha, we see Mrs. Lou, and there's all these people there, and Randall is there.
Right.
And Mrs. Lou chases him away, and as he leaves, he calls everybody vultures.
Right.
Which I think is kind of funny because it feels like he was the one trying to be a vulture. If she chased him away, he's the one that was trying to take shit.
Right. It's funny because at this point, Randall has not made friends with anybody.
No, Randall's not doing so great.
Not Donna, not Boyd, and now Mrs. Wu is pissed at him.
And remember, he already made enemies on the bus.
Right.
He already had a fight with Elgin, pissed Mary off.
Yeah, so at this point, Randall doesn't have any allies. I've read in the episode descriptions that eventually Jim is going to team up with Randall.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I'm very curious how that's going to come to play, because I don't see how Randall is going to win him over in any kind of way. And by the way, he's going to end up regretting his decision. Big surprise there. Okay, so Jim and Tabitha are looking at the house.
Yep.
And Jim says that as the creator of roller coasters, he occasionally put in things that seemed impossible
Right.
to get a reaction from the people.
Because the more impossible it seems, the bigger reaction you're going to get, and the more people are going to enjoy it.
Right. So he's thinking, looking at the same principle, how all these things are impossible.
Right. We're talking about the electricity again.
Right. They can't seem to get off that subject. But like, and she's like, well, no, I saw it. And it was like, no, look, I believe you.
But it's impossible.
Right. So he comes to the conclusion that many have, that this is a screwed up experiment to test how they will react. And he brings up the voice on the radio. And
yeah, he tells her, finally, the radio worked. Guess what? Like,
right.
You should have covered that the first time you guys talked earlier today.
Yes. That was more important than the wires.
It was. It was.
So he got a response, and she asks, well, why isn't anybody doing anything about it? And why aren't they all reacting? And it's because they don't know.
Yeah. The majority of people didn't hear. She says, well, who did hear?
Right. And Tabitha's questions leads Jim to go to Donna.
Right, because we know Donna definitely heard.
Right.
Now, I was under the impression more people should have heard. Like, the entire town was standing around. Was it that quiet that they're the only two that heard?
Well, I don't think it was quiet. I think it was maybe perhaps too loud, because there was a lot going on at the time. When that happened...
I mean, the radio signal was that quiet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, I guess the storm was coming and people were starting to
panic,
flutter,
basically.
But other people had to have heard besides the two of them. I don't know who exactly. Probably just our Colony House extras, but I'm sure somebody else heard.
Yeah, probably. So we have a Boyd scene where he goes into his office and sees the Father Khatri. Now,
before that, he's looking in that mirror again.
Oh, yes.
Boyd spends an awful lot of time staring in that bathroom mirror.
Yeah, he's awfully vain. Okay, so...
Yeah, he walks towards his desk, and Father Khatri is sitting there.
Yeah.
Our second dead character brought back for a scene.
I posed a question. Is this a ghost, a hallucination? And let me get your take on that.
I say hallucination.
Hallucination?
Hallucination mixed with talking to his own conscious.
That was my take as well. There were only a couple people who disagreed with that and said it was a ghost. And the rest of them thought it was the worms somehow impacting him psychologically and causing the hallucination.
Yeah. I mean, what's causing the hallucination? I don't know. He's got a lot of things that could be working against him right now.
Right. Well, at this point, I think he needs somebody to talk to.
Absolutely.
And Father Khatri was the person that
was his person, right? We talked about that.
Yes.
That's his confidant.
So Boyd yells about something.
This reminds me of our Quantum Leap episode this last season, where
yes, I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, we had a scene where our main character Ben had this whole conversation with his fiance who wasn't there. He was drugged. So that is something to note, that it's a drug induced thing, which we could have got here from the spiders or the worms or anything. The tea,
anything that's going on with him at this point. So Boyd, yells at him about something, and then Khatri's like, all right, we could talk about that, but let's talk about what you really want to talk about, which is, how are you going to tell Kenny that Sarah is responsible for his father's death? And his argument, and I'm not sure where I land on this, but I basically agree. It's rendered moot by the end of the episode.
Yeah.
But his argument is, what does it benefit Kenny to know this information?
Right. He's basically saying, don't tell Kenny.
Right.
Don't tell Kenny. Keep this a secret.
You're gonna
at least for now.
You're gonna alleviate your own conscience at the sake of Kenny's well-being.
Right.
Because Kenny looks up to Boyd as a father figure. He's what he has. He's what did Ellis call it the other day? I'll give you a clue, Khatri. It was the title of last week's episode. Boyd is Kenny's tether.
Right.
And broken people do not survive in this place. As a leader, you need to make decisions that are sometimes shitty. Do you want to be everybody's friend? Because in that case, you can just go be a bartender. I hear there's an opening. You know what, Khatri? That's a little too soon for that joke.
Well, there is an opening.
Yes, there is. But also, there's an opening in the church, too, I hear.
There is.
Oh,
there sure
burn,
is.
Khatri, burn. Anyway.
Yes, is anybody on that bus
Yeah.
qualified to be a preacher?
Yes, I don't know.
And who?
It's definitely not going to be Randall.
Who's going to marry Ellis and Fatima?
Yeah, That's an interesting question. Maybe
Yeah.
Boyd will handle it.
Maybe Boyd. Yeah.
So yeah. This okay. So in the vein of this being a hallucination and him talking to his conscience, I'm pretty positive.
He's trying to give himself permission
Mhm.
to keep the secret.
Yeah,
That's where I get from it.
But I also think that some of the arguments that Katri is making are arguments that they themselves had in the past. We did see one version of that in one episode.
It is similar to them disagreeing on like what to do with Frank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that some of these arguments that Katri is making are arguments that Katri has made in the past.
And also I want to note there's Kenny's chess set is sitting on the desk during all of this.
And he picks up a piece.
Yeah, and we've talked like throughout this episode, there's mentions of the chess game. Like, we saw the chess game in that flashback. He was carrying it in when they brought his dad to the clinic, and he was like, look, we can play chess here. And earlier when Kenny and Boyd were talking about Sarah, Kenny said, that the voices are using Sarah like a pawn. So we are looking at the chess game this season, or this episode specifically. And, and that can go back to all this character development it's all a game of chess, right?
Yeah.
Of who's telling who what, who knows what, who has secrets where, what's your next move going to be to each of these characters. So that's kind of the overlaying theme of this episode, I think, is we're talking about that game of chess. What is your next move?
Well, Jim's next move, good transition there. I'm proud of myself. I'm back, patting myself on the back, is to go and speak to Donna. Donna ends up thinking that they shouldn't tell anyone about the voice until they know more. If they're being observed, that's not a good thing.
Right.
And we don't want to tip those people off.
He's like, you're being so stupid, shut up.
Right. And that's typical in the way that Donna handles these types of situations. She's a blunt character.
Okay, now, we're talking about where all of our characters are. The last time we saw Donna, which couldn't have been that long ago, she just had that discussion with Boyd. Right. So she was already all worked up over that. She was doing that stuff in the greenhouse. She's freaking out. And now Jim comes and she's just like, what? Like, leave me the frick alone, you people.
And in a little bit, she's going to have to deal with another situation.
Yeah.
Jim asks about the radio, and Donna tells him that it's in the back. It's a little bit broken. Jim goes to deal with it, and she says, don't do anything until I tell you to.
Yeah. And she has really good points here. Yeah, someone's watching us. But they're not trying to help us. Whoever they are, they're obviously not helping. Otherwise, they would have.
Right.
So it's either like a malicious human force or it's the monsters themselves.
Right.
Either way, what good is it going to be to communicate with these people further? Whoever that voice was, they're not helpful. So don't engage. Why were you going to engage? You're going to make it worse.
Right. So Donna is interrupted with her conversation with Jim, which is pretty much over anyway, by Randall beating the crap out of somebody because he went through his bag.
Right.
Randall continues to be a total ass. There's not a redeeming moment that he's had so far in the series.
And I agree with him. Like, okay, so Colony House has this communal living theory where everybody shares everything. You don't get any personal belongings, and somebody's going through his shit, and he's not happy about it. And I get that.
Okay, so
these people were not given a choosing ceremony.
Exactly, that's what
they didn't pick the flower.
They
were just told, go live at Colony House, and now suddenly these people are going through your shit.
Right.
So I don't blame him for being upset, but he needs some anger management classes, because his response is literally to beat this guy up.
Right. So, yeah, he's basically like, all right, so my rule is you don't touch my shit, and that's it. And Donna temporarily looks beaten in this moment. But, that's not going to continue. We cut to Kenny and Sarah. Kenny is trying to find any reasons to support Boyd. Because at the end of the day, he knows this is going to come out. And he wants to be there for Boyd. But he needs a reason. Something solid to hold on to.
Right. He's basically begging her to reassure him that she thought she was doing something good. She's like, tell me why you did this. How did this happen? And he's still only talking about attempting to kill Ethan and accidentally killing her brother. That's all he knows she's done.
Right. Sarah says Boyd gave her a second chance that she didn't deserve. And her guilt steadily builds up to the point where she feels the need to confess.
because
she
he
did to
says,
Kenny's
you know,
dad.
I think of you as a friend. My mom loves you. You're the daughter she's never had. He's asking her, help me help you.
Right.
But all it's doing is eating on her guilt more. She's feeling more and more guilty. And God, Sarah, all you gotta do is keep your mouth shut. That was best. It really was. But she couldn't help herself.
Right.
And she alleviates her own guilt, which
is the exact same thing that Khatri, Boyd's conscience, was warning him against.
Right.
And yeah. We cut to Donna and Fatima, who debate Randall. Fatima says, maybe we should ease up on the rules. And Donna's like, well, what next? We want to give him an entire wing of the house? And she says that she knows the type that Randall is. Everything is a personal attack. And so...
And she's looking at that floor, where she had axed the floor up in season 1. And she's really losing it. Yes. I mean, she's been losing it for a while now, but all of these things, and she's just like, she's going to explode. I was a little worried when she grabbed that axe.
Thought he was going to, put it through his head or something.
Last time she grabbed that axe is when she put that hole in the floor.
Right, so she's going to put a hole in his head instead.
She came close.
Yeah. So she goes and finds Randall. And basically,
she says, get your shit.
And he's like,
she's kicking him out of the house.
Screw you. And so she wields the axe to attack the wall, freaking everybody out that's there.
She's doing a number on this house.
Right. This is not too long after, shooting a tire out with a shotgun.
Yeah.
This is another impulsive action, but in this case, I think this is what Randall needs. So she ends up bringing him to the bus, which Bacta moved.
Yeah, so they get to town as we see Bacta moving the bus just around the corner, so it's not in front of the diner anymore.
She says, I don't want people to stare at it while they're eating. And this is kind of to me, seems to suggest that Bacta has more or less accepted the situation.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, it's interesting because at the time that we saw her, when we met her first, I really did not think that she was going to ever get to that point. But she's gotten to that point much quicker than I thought she did. Donna has a talisman, specifically the one that was hanging on the Matthews house.
Yeah, and my question is, when did she get that?
I don't know. Maybe it was in the debris that she was digging out.
She must have found it.
Yeah, I guess so.
She's the one who put it in her pocket. We skipped that step.
Yeah.
We get every other detail of these people's lives, but I was questioning, where did that come from? Like, we were wondering, were you going to find it? Right. I guess they did find it.
Yes. She puts it on the bus and tells Randall how it works and says, this is your new home.
Yep, have fun.
Right. Randall says, you made your point, but Donna doesn't think so. He can not see what's going on, and she thinks that he's kind of dumb. He kind of is, and that it's going to take longer for reality to set in.
Yeah, and she says, he'll get it after he sits here and stares at the creatures trying to get in the bus all night with no shades over the windows, and she's probably kind of hoping that he's stupid enough to open the door.
Right, and that he'll just die.
Yeah. And then she can say, I gave him a talisman.
Right. What else do you want from me? So Donna leaves, and Randall looks spooked. Boyd goes to the church and meets Tilly, Dancing in the Rain lady.
Dancing in the Rain. She introduced herself to Boyd and to us finally. My name is Tilly.
And she has more information that's really convenient for her to have, and I don't know how she has.
And again, we don't find out what she actually wanted to talk to Boyd about.
Right.
She starts asking him, she says, I heard you had an adventure.
Right.
I'm convinced this woman has something really important to share with us.
Mm-hmm.
She knows something. And I don't think she's bad. People are super suspicious of her, but I think she has helpful information, and nobody will give her the time of day.
Right. I would say that every scene that she's been in has been extremely strange. I mean, maybe that's just because she's strange in itself, and she was dancing in the rain.
I know I talked about this last week. She's an observer. Mm-hmm. She's paying attention. She knows what everybody's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel we need to talk to her.
Mm.
She's got something to tell us.
All right.
Or show us. Or give us.
Do you want to go talk to her?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go do it.
We got to line a lot of people up and have a conversation.
All right.
But she's got something she wants to say, and nobody will let her speak. She was looking for Christy. Now she's looking for Boyd, and everybody is just pushing her off.
Right.
I want to know, what does she want?
Well, in this specific instance, she mentions where Kenny went, which is why Boyd doesn't continue talking to her.
Right, Boyd's looking for, he says, I gotta go talk to my deputy, who he thinks is in the church, and she's like, you won't find him there. He walked off towards the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, completely dismissive of what did she want to talk to him about in the first
Right.
place.
Well, at this point, I think he's concerned.
Of course.
Right.
Of course. Talking to Tilly is not going to be a important thing for him, but it's important for me. I want to know what is this lady trying to get to?
All right. So we go to Kenny, who's staring at the spot where his father
the boiler
died.
room where he found his dad's body.
Boyd comes in, and I think he knows. He knows that Kenny knows.
Yeah.
He has the bearing of a man that's about to have a confrontation.
Kenny tells us the story. He remembers before coming here, he never once heard his mom cry, and now she sobs every single night from her room. He hears her crying. And the reason she's crying is because she feels guilty. She blames herself for not being with her husband. And she says, if I had been there with him, if I had stayed with him at the clinic, which was an option, and they maybe should have done that, I could have prevented him from opening that door.
But we know that's not the truth.
We know that's not the case, but they all have thought this whole time that he's the one who opened the door, getting himself and the nurse and Toby killed. And she's carrying that guilt, thinking it's her fault, which is so sad.
Kenny knows that, and now he knows that Boyd...
Right, and he already knows at this point, because he's like, but that's not the truth, is it? Which means he knows Boyd knows.
Right.
And he's trying to make Boyd understand how guilty he should feel about keeping this secret. And because it's not just keeping a secret from Kenny, there's other people involved here. You've made my mom upset by keeping this a secret.
I think Boyd already understands that.
Sure, he does.
And that's part of the reason for his psychological problems in this episode and in general. But yeah, so he demands that Sarah go into the box, and Boyd tries to explain, saying, hey, look, I wanted to tell you. And he doesn't want to put Sarah in the box, and Kenny's like, takes off the badge, upset. Throws it down, says, watch your own six, and leaves the scene. Yeah. And that is how the episode ends.
Kenny gives his resignation. I hope that doesn't stick. I hope they can make up.
I don't know, because this is pretty harsh. I don't know that this is repairable at this point.
Here's the thing. I feel sorry for both of these characters.
That is exactly my position.
Like, neither one of them is really in the wrong.
Right. Boyd did what he thought was best.
Yeah, and
Boyd thought
he probably was best.
Right.
If he had just killed Sarah... he'd be dead now.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have answers. She has answers, or she has the ability to get answers.
Right. Boyd felt what he did was necessary, but I completely understand Kenny being upset.
He should have let Kenny in on some things earlier.
Yeah.
And maybe if Kenny knew all of these things, maybe he would have gone along with it.
I'm not so sure that if he knew about Sarah causing his father's death that he would have gone along.
Yeah, but, like... if Boyd was like, okay, she's my prisoner, and I'll deal with her, but I'm going to take her with me because I need to take her with me. Did we already have this conversation? I'm feeling very deja vu right now. I don't
think so. I don't recall having it. I mean, maybe we did.
Maybe this is a conversation Adam and I had. I feel like if Kenny he'd still obviously be upset and want her dead, but I feel like he'd be a lot less angry at Boyd if Boyd had just kept him in the loop of what's going on.
Right, and maybe their relationship would not be broken right now.
Yeah.
And right now, I am so worried about Kenny.
Honestly, I feel like Kenny's going to forgive Sarah before he forgives Boyd.
Right.
Which is... ugh.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, he's lost his father. He's in a weird place with Christy, his other important relationship in this town.
Yeah.
And his relationship with Boyd is completely obliterated at this point. Like, he's completely lost faith and trust in this man that he considered a father.
Right.
So.
And now he has given up the badge, which was his role in the community. Mm-hmm. So now he's just abandoning that as well.
And it's really interesting to see where Kenny is going to go from here.
Yeah.
Like, is he just going to completely disintegrate? Now, you've mentioned that because of the victor's drawings, that Mrs. Moy is also going to die.
Mrs. Lou.
Right. I'm hoping Mrs. Moy doesn't die. I hope you continue to live a long life, but we think Mrs. Wu is not long for this world.
I think she's in trouble.
So if she goes, Kenny has absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing left. Right now, his only remaining tether is his mother.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel so bad for both of these characters.
And she doesn't have anybody but Kenny.
Right.
I mean, she doesn't even speak very much English.
I mean, she has Jade, sort of.
She's building a relationship with Jade, but just think about that. Like, she speaks very little English. Her
Mhm.
son's the only person she can really communicate with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's got to be like so much harder. You know, you came here and only your family's the people you can really like express yourself to because of this language barrier. And now your husband's dead and your son's going through all this shit. And all she can do is make her tea and serve sandwiches.
Right. And you have to imagine that Kenny is going to tell her mother what actually happened.
Yeah.
So not only is Kenny's relationship here decimated, you have to wonder how Mrs. Wu is going to react to that
Right.
towards Boyd.
Right.
So, I mean, I know that they're specifically tight, but I'm sure Mrs. Wu looks to Boyd for leadership, and how is
Sure.
this going to affect her in this situation?
Sure. All right, so the clocks.
Yes, okay.
All right, so in this scene with Kenny and Boyd in the basement of the school area, you know, under the clinic, the clock reads 7 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And 7 on the dot it reads. And earlier in the scene where Boyd was at the station talking to Khatri,
Okay.
that clock read 8 o'clock
Mm-hmm.
on the dot. And both of these clocks, the second hand's not moving. And I was questioning, do these clocks always read these times? Like, are they not running clocks? And I wanted to go, again, I didn't get a chance to go back, but I want to go back and look at past episodes. Are these clocks always reading these times, or do they read different times? Like, are the clocks moving? The clocks obviously aren't accurate.
Right.
Because they're showing all different times that aren't sequential.
Right.
But are they stuck on these numbers, or are they moving?
Well, it's interesting to question also, how is time moving in this town compared
Exactly.
to reality in general?
And
Like,
there's been
what time
a lot
zone
of
are they even
there's
in?
been a lot of theories about time.
Yeah.
Right? And some people are saying, oh, well, they don't have any clocks. How do they know what time? They have clocks.
Mm.
The question is, are the clocks doing anything?
Right.
And
They just need enough to have a general idea of when it's going to be dark to know how much time they
yeah.
have.
And then the question comes in, are they experiencing seasons? Like, is
Right.
the weather changing?
There was the guy that I shouted out a couple weeks ago. I don't quite remember his name. That asked that said specifically that there are no seasons.
Yeah. And my answer is we haven't lived here long enough to
Right.
know that. Like,
Mhm.
we're still within a couple of weeks of when we arrived.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the station clock read 8, which is a lost number, by the way. That's why that one pointed out to me. So now I'm paying attention to these clocks. The station clock read 8. Little bit later, the school clock read 7.
Mm-hmm.
If that's a clock, that read 12. They're all reading solid hours. And I was wondering, is this some sort of a puzzle? Now, if this was a video game, which
Yes.
is something we've talked about,
Mm-hmm.
if this is a video game, this is the type of thing you'd have to do to solve a puzzle, to open a door, to
Right.
move on to the next level. And we know there's 12 talismans.
Mm-hmm.
There's 12 unique talismans the creators of this show have told us.
Okay.
Maybe they have to line the talismans up with the locations based on the clocks.
Okay.
Because there's 12 sides on a clock. We've got 12 talisman. Maybe each talisman aligns to a particular location. And if you can put them in the right places, we're going to unlock something.
Sweet. We can go into the next escape room.
Yeah, exactly. Open the door for the next level. But I don't know. I'm just looking at these clocks. Like, I feel like they're trying to show us something with these clocks. I feel like we need to pay attention to them. And I definitely want to go back and look at past episodes. And even if they're not, like, even if the clocks are moving, obviously they're not, like, synced with each other.
Right.
It is the spacing of the time between the different clocks meaningful in some way? Or is it just like, oh, they're broken clocks? But if electricity works, why aren't the clocks working? So
Right.
So I feel like there's something to be said about the time on the clocks. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but I found it interesting that I saw 3 solid numbers on clocks in this episode.
Interesting.
And none of them were moving. Like,
Right.
the second hands were all still.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, so I definitely want to go back and look at all of these clocks more, because we see these clocks in all these scenes, and it's the type of thing that you don't necessarily look at on casual viewing of a TV episode.
Well, next week, I'm assuming that we can look forward to the hour-long discussion about
the clock.
Yes.
We'll see how deep I get into that. I kind of recall seeing a clock. I want to say it was the station clock in an earlier episode, and it wasn't on a solid hour, because I think at that point I was looking for lost numbers, but I didn't, like, take note of it. So I want to go back and just kind of compare a few scenes
Right.
where we see each of these clocks and see what these clocks are doing. Because if they are changing, then maybe it's even more notable when we see all the clocks line up like this.
Oh, okay.
You know,
that
like
would
if
be
the clocks are
interesting.
moving, why in this episode are all the clocks on the hour every time we see them?
That is interesting. I did sort of notice that they were like they were on the hour.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So next episode, are we gonna get to night, do you think?
Well,
or are we not gonna get there till 6?
I know from the episode's description that we're going to be dealing with the townspeople learning about Sarah.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have the episode that I thought we were going to have this week, in that he's going to have to make his case for saving her life.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to support him at this point? Not Kenny. We know that for damn sure. I think Ellis might want to support him, but how effective is he going to be?
Where is Ellis?
Yeah, we didn't even see him this
What's
episode.
he doing during this half hour?
Right. Maybe
Last time we saw Ellis was when he
at the diner proposing.
said let's get married now. Maybe he's off planning the wedding.
Maybe. So, and actually, it's kind of interesting. You know what the Matthews position is going to be. Like, put her in the box.
Right. Like, they have no sympathy for her. After.
Right.
I think Ethan might support her.
Yeah?
Yeah. Even though he's the one that, almost got killed. He sees the boy in white. I feel like he might be like, no, she's important.
Right.
Don't kill her.
And then it's going to be interesting.
But I don't think anyone will listen to him.
Oh, no. Nobody will listen to him. Actually, I've heard some people say that they'll put her in the box and nothing will happen to her.
Right. That's the question. Because some people think that, she's got the worms. I don't think that that's what she has. But the question is she being protected?
She's an agent of
the night that she left the door open, she walked home. At this point, we already had like the family running to Colony House. The monsters were on the porch. Why was she able to walk home without running into any trouble? That's the question that's come up.
They clearly didn't want her to die in that instance because they still had use for her.
Right.
The question is, do they have use for her anymore?
And then it's the question of who is they?
Right.
Like we go back to who are the voices? How is that actually related to the monsters? Are they on the same side? Is there some difference here? Like, we really don't know, who's trying to get her to do what.
Right.
And now, we got the boy in white talking to her too, which clearly is a separate force than some of these other forces. And I don't know. So yeah, if she goes in the box, she might just live through the night because they might completely ignore her.
Right.
Which I think would make this worse for everybody because then it's like, well, what the heck?
Right. Also, I'm kind of curious. Well, the newbies from the bus, they're not going to have a stake in any kind of conversation.
Yeah, they don't even know who she is.
Right.
Like, who are you?
Right.
What'd you do?
So the only other important person that I can think of is Donna. What is Donna's position going to be? Is she going to support Boyd or not?
Yeah.
They have this new
and remember
relationship.
The box was a town law.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Donna would have concerned herself with those type of things previous to now.
But yeah, there's more fluidity between Colony House and the town than there was before.
Right. Now it's like we're one community. So we don't know how Donna felt about the box to begin with.
Right. So it's going to be interesting to see if she has a position on that.
But knowing the way she ran her community, I would think she's against killing people as punishment.
Yeah.
Like, they're a kind of live and let live for the day type of community.
Other than Randall, House. Of course.
I mean, people who chose Colony House.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how she'll feel. And I kind of feel like she won't want to give an opinion at this point. She's tired of making decisions. She's tired of being a leader.
Right.
And I think she'll just be like, I don't care what you do.
Right.
It doesn't concern me. Let me go act something.
Yeah. So, we'll see next episode. You have any other thoughts for this episode? Or any other thoughts of any kind?
I don't have anything else in my notes. I think there's lots still to learn, and I'm excited to move forward. I think we're going to start getting answers. People have been anxious for them, but I think they're coming.
Yes.
I think we're going to start seeing more and more. And I still don't know when it happens, if it's next episode or when it is, but we've got that scene. We know where Victor and Jade are going to end up at the junkyard together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm eager for that. More interactions between those two.
Yep.
Because there's answers to be seen there. I keep saying I really want Victor and Jade and Ethan to team up. I want to see the three of them interacting make a quest party together, because that's the dynamic you need to get information. Ethan is the bond between the two of them that's going to be able to help them communicate.
The From Vengers.
So I want to see that. That's what I want to see. And yeah, who's going to have tea in the next episode?
I don't know. Who's going to offer the tea? This week it was Julie.
Yeah.
Not Mrs. Moy.
Julie's been, she's been brought over to the tea side.
The tea. Is the tea side the good side? I think it is, because tea is pretty good. Tea can help you sleep. Tea has all sorts of, health applications, so it's definitely healthy for you.
And how is Kenny going to get through this? Poor
Kenny. Poor Kenny.
Poor Kenny.
We're definitely going to see... I think he's definitely going to be in a bad place in the next episode, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so we would like to hear from you. Thoughts on the podcast, thoughts on this episode. Stacy can be reached at...
I can be reached on Twitter at TVN Coupon Talk.
And if you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can join my Corman Productions Facebook page. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can buy something from the Corman Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as ourselves. And you can like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to our channel. This is Dave and Stacy from Corman Productions, signing off.